A mysterious woman with a distant look in her eyes idly stares out the window at the passing landscape as the train she is on zooms across the Trans-Siberian Railway towards Shanghai. On the train, she is attacked by a dark magician, but a mysterious man with dark powers of his own intervenes and saves her from the dark magician. Together, they will travel across Asia and Europe in an effort to stop the dark magician from enacting whatever mysterious scheme he is plotting. And along the way, they will battle horrors so foul that the mere sight of them would have driven lesser mortals mad. But unlike our previous adventures, our heroes are not alone. They will be aided by spies, terrorist masters, street urchins, and the Japanese army. And through cooperation and the power of friendship and love, they will vanquish evil. This continues and concludes the tale that Koudelka began, and it marks the proper beginning of the series, and sets up the events that will be continued and concluded in Covenant and from the New World. This is a retrospective on a franchise that lives and died on the PS2, a franchise that is today completely forgotten by the masses. This is a retrospective on Shadow Hearts. In the previous episode, we looked back at the game's progenitor, Koudelka, an ambitious PS1 tactical horror RPG that absolutely gripped me with its dark atmosphere, brutal narrative, and compelling characters. And it gripped me so hard that I finished this 15-hour game in one day. It became an instant classic for me, and it is a game that I will rave about for years to come. And when I found out that the game had not one, but 3 sequels, I knew that I had to check them out and review them, and that's how this retrospective happened. So, Shadow Hearts. It has a lot to live up to, but it's still made by the same developer, with only the director from the first game being absent. And it's on a more powerful console, so it probably has some upgrades in the visual department. I guess we'll find out when we take a journey to the Chinese province of Manchuria and into the wonderful world of Shadow Hearts. Our second stop in the Shadow Hearts retrospective. The game opens on the scene of a murder, but before we can make heads or tails of what is happening, the perspective changes to our leading lass as she stares idly out of a window from within a speeding train car, lost in her own thoughts. But when a dark figure with a mischievous grin enters her train car and starts effortlessly murdering her would-be protectors, she is jolted back into reality. As the mysterious figure is about to assault our leading lass, another mysterious figure enters the train car and the two of them fight it out. The first figure pushes the second figure out of the way with a powerful spell and grabs the girl and runs off. The second figure, who will shortly introduce himself to us as Yuri, collects himself and makes chase, and then the game begins. We take control of Yuri and we pursue the mysterious figure, confronting him on top of the train and injuring him before grabbing the girl and jumping off. And that's when the game begins proper. Wait, the bad guy's name is Roger Baking, like the guy from the first game? I guess this will make sense later. Anyways, Yuri and the girl collect themselves. Girl becomes scared of Yuri and runs off, but before he can run after her, he's assaulted by an intrusive disembodied voice, who tells him that he must unite the light and the dark. Not knowing what to make of this, Yuri gets back to the pursuit of the girl. And his pursuit isn't long as she lays on the ground nearby, having fainted for the second time in 3 minutes. Yuri finds her unconscious body and contemplates touching her, and then laughs in kind of a rapey way. Really? The two make their introductions, with our guy being Yuri as mentioned earlier, and the girl being Alice. The two of them then do what Edward and Koudelka did in the first game, and they decide to team up, despite finding each other's personalities repulsive. Well, Alice finds Yuri's personality repulsive, which I completely understand. I think if a strange dude came across my unconscious body and contemplated raping me, I would be a little put off as well. In general, we're not really off to a great start. The game opens with an FMV that legitimately looks worse than the FMV Void did in the first game. The voice acting is way worse, what little there is, because outside of the opening FMV, everything else is text only. And that's a fair route to go, because the first game sold poorly and this follow-up was a make it or break it game for the studio. so they probably had to cut costs somewhere. But without voice acting, they have to make up for it with emotive animation work. And they don't, because the animation work is also worse than it was in the previous game, which was fully voiced, mind you. And speaking of emoting, emojis are literally how emotions are conveyed in lieu of animation and voice work. Which could have been fine, but aside from hearts, question marks and exclamation marks, the rest of them are what I believe to be Japan-specific emojis. Like, I think the 3 lightning bolts that Yuri get when he receives visions are splitting headaches. And I think the white drop emoji is supposed to be the characters being anxious and sweaty. But I have no fucking idea what the 3 vertical dot emoji is, so... Oh! And the last point in this rant. In case you haven't noticed, the graphics are also worse in this PS2 follow-up to a PS1 game. The backdrops are boring, it's hard to navigate and tell what you can walk on and interact with. And I think the player models have the exact same polygon count as they did in the last game. And if you think that I might just be hyperbolic and just be shitting on everything at this point, regardless of whether it's true or not, you would be right, and I was thinking that myself, so I took 2 screenshots, one from this game and one from Koudelka. And the only thing I changed in the emulator for Koudelka was to make it widescreened, and then I posted it on Discord asking which game people thought was the PS1 game and which one they thought was the PS2 game. And the answer was that Shadow Hearts was the PS1 game, so it's not just me. Anyways, Alice and Yuri team up and try to find out what's going on. And in an effort to do so, they need to cross a river. And so they activate a dam thing to do that. While the dam drains the river, they decide to rest up, and naturally Alice is unconscious again. Hey, person editing this, can we get an unconscious girl counter? Cool. While Alice is unconscious, Yuri's dead dad appears to him. His name is Foxface, and he challenges him to a battle, and during the battle he transforms into a demon and kills Yuri. Yuri then wakes up in a graveyard and activates a gravestone and battles a demon tiger, absorbing its spirit, allowing him to transform into said demon tiger at will. Okay, that's actually kind of cool. In lieu of Koudelka's open-ended magic system, there's a transformation system that provides the player with basically the same abilities. Nice! Trying to find a way out of the demon spirit graveyard, Yuri encounters 4 mysterious masks that talk about something called malice, which is a mechanic in the game, and we're gonna ignore that mechanic for now because it will not be relevant until 8 hours from now. Oh hey, it's me from the editing bay. Scratch that last paragraph. It won't be relevant ever because I ended up editing that part out of the script because malice is a stupid game mechanic that I spent 10 minutes on during the entire course of this playthrough. After defeating the malice spirit and returning to the land of the living, Yuri is the one awoken by Alice for a change, and the 2 of them continue their journey. They come across a village, and a pair of strange children greet them at the gate. They are hesitant to let them in, but upon realizing that Alice is a female, they change their minds. Ew, game, really? In the village, they come upon a mass grave, and a creepy man very heavily hints at the fact that the town is full of demons, and that he wants to eat our 2 heroes. But they completely ignore that and go see the mayor anyways, who is also very clearly an evil demon person, but again, they completely ignore that, and then the mayor locks them inside her house. And these characters are idiots who have no business of saving the world from anything. But somehow they manage to get out of the mayor's house anyways, and they go to confront her. They learn that the town was taken over by cat demons not long ago, and that the cat demons have eaten everyone in the village and placed a curse upon the place, making escape impossible. Our heroes completely disregard this information and head for the town gate. But they surprisingly find it magically sealed. But at the gate, they do encounter a Taoist monk and a massage therapist, who tries to sexually assault Yuri. Really, game. Again. After avoiding being the victim of a sex crime, Yuri and Alice team up with the Taoist monk Su Shen and chase after the cat demon mayor. Like last time, I've held off on explaining the game's combat system until the party got assembled, which it has been now, so now we can talk about it. Combat is similar, yet different from Koudelka. It's still a turn-based RPG, and our characters still level up and get skills, but unlike Koudelka, we cannot choose how to grow the characters, which is a shame. And while there's both mana and HP, there's also an extra bar now called Sanity. Sanity will deplete every time an enemy lands a successful hit on one of the party members. And if it hits 0, the character will frenzy and just do random actions until the battle is over and sanity is restored, or until another party member throws a sanity potion at them. The tactical board from the last game is also gone, and in place is a party system that does not work. Like, seriously. You can place characters in either the front or the back, which you would think would make the front character soak up all the enemy's attacks, but it doesn't. So yeah, you can't move around on the board, and you can't choose what character should receive damage and what character shouldn't. Which would be fine if the game gave us control over how to level our characters, because then we could just make them all semi-tanks. But we can't. So what we end up with is that some characters are useful and some are not. Like, Magical Girl is completely useless since she can't do much damage, doesn't have much health, and spends most of her battle healing herself because we can't make Yuri tank the enemies. But does the game bring anything new to the table? Yes it does, and it's a mixed bag depending on how you like playing your JRPGs. Because the game introduces something called the Judgment Ring, which is a skewed clock face that will appear on the screen when you initiate an attack. When the attack is initiated, a pointer will do one rotation on the ring, and on the ring, bars will appear, and you need to hit the X button when the pointer swings over one of the bars. If you're performing a melee attack, there will be 3 bars, and if you hit all of them in succession, you will perform 3 attacks. And there's also little extra areas on the bars, and if you hit those little extra areas on the bars, you will do more damage per attack. For magic, you need to hit all the bars, or else the spell won't be cast. And, like the melee attacks, one of the bars here has a little extra area that you can hit inside to make the spell do more damage, or healing, or whatever. Whether you like this or not depends, like I said, on how you like playing your JRPGs. Because while the system didn't bother me outright, I would have preferred if I could just sit back and select the attacks I wanted and let the actions play out. But that's up to personal preference, I guess. So, where were we? Right. Demon Cat Lady Mayor person. We need to find her and break the seal so we can escape the village and go somewhere. Oh, and while we're doing that, we can talk about the monster design, which is one of the plus points I will give the game, because like in Koudelka, they are terrifying. I was actually a little worried that the game was gonna be bland, because in the beginning of the game, when we were running around in the countryside, we were only fighting regular JRPG enemies like wolves and bats, and that's never a good sign. But here in the village, demon cats and zombified villagers appear, and I like that the enemies we fight fit the theme of the dungeon that we're in. And I think it's one of the few things that this game does better than Koudelka. Fuck it, it might be the only thing it does better, who knows. The design of the village and its descent into a bloody overworld type of thing also gives me a little hope that this game isn't all trash. After killing the cat demon mayor lady person, Sushen departs the party because he has other business, and Yuri and Alice make their way to Yamarira. But before we find out what happens next, we need to watch this cutscene of the Japanese army investigating the train car incident and find out what they're plotting. And then this cutscene of Roger Bacon meeting with a mysterious sorcerer and find out what they are plotting. Because that's what you want in your horror RPG, right? To know exactly what the enemy is plotting all the time. It's not like the fear of the unknown is the foundation for horror, is it? Nah, that can't be an established fact that literally everyone knows. Anyways, in Yamarira, our heroes get implicated in a terrorist attack when a bomb goes off right outside their hotel, and together with the terrorist, known to us as the alluring spy, they flee into the sewers. They make their way to an airfield where the alluring spy, Margaret, has a plane. However, they are stopped in their tracks first when the Japanese army shows up, and then when the plane is blown up. By a dog. Yes, a dog. Who's also a demon, mind you, but also a dog. A cute little doggo blew up our plane. After fighting off the dog, Margaret finds another plane and the group make their daring escape out of Yamarira. As the group arrive in the town of Dalian... Man, this game is boring. The setup is fine and all that, and while Koudelka had some pacing issues, it's nothing compared to this game. One of the rabbit holes that games often fall into when they don't have voice acting is too much dialogue, because voice acting costs money basically per letter, and it's expensive. and as a result the script is often very heavily edited, so it's straight to the point to avoid paying for unnecessary shit. And that was sort of Koudelka's strength, and it's definitely this game's weakness, because it doesn't have voice acting, so the characters just go on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And there are flashbacks that don't matter. Cutscenes of characters we don't know that don't matter. We have cutscenes of resolutions to what those characters that we don't know that don't matter doing shit and getting resolutions to their subplots that have no bearing on the overarching plot. And we got cutscenes of what the big bads are doing, which I explained earlier makes the game objectively worse. And it's not like it's even well written. It's supposed to take place in 1913, but the characters talk like they do in the first Pokemon game, saying shit like pops, grams, yikes, and fuck! All this combined with the lack of animation, the shitty characters meandering plot little or fucks around in the field for 10 hours, characters that leave and join the party at random, just makes the whole thing less horror, less intimate, less personal, and makes the whole thing feels more like a fucking bland PSP RPG from 2008 than it does the successor to an absolute gem of a horror game. Like this town, Dalian, there's a cool plot going on, like in the last town, but like the last town, it doesn't have any real effect on the overarching plot. It plays no role in that, and our characters don't really learn anything or grow as people. And by this point I was 8 hours into the game, and since 4 of those hours had been spent reading really shitty out of place dialogue and side shit, I was just mentally checked out. So I didn't pay attention to the plot about a woman who lost her voice and then got cursed with a man's voice and then killed herself, and that's a shame because I love that shit. But I would have really loved that shit in another game where it was the central plot, and not in this game where it's a pointless side story that will have literally no bearing on the main plot. Seriously, we spent 2 hours in this village, and how much of that do you think is spent advancing the plot? I don't actually know how much time specifically, but it's this bit here where the Japanese spies pretend to be smugglers and get our party on their ship so they can ambush them when they get to Shanghai. Which is fucking dumb because we've actually seen them in a cutscene make this plan. We know that there's a twist coming. And this stupid bit of story information gets less screen time than this 3-minute bit where a voice actress just makes slurp slurp noises. Yes, this is a real cutscene in the game. This is happening. I had to sit and suffer through this, so now you also have to enjoy. Oh! 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 Slip. Slip. Splat. Slip. Slip. Splat. Slip. 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 Splat. Slip. Slip. Shwee! Shwee! Slip. Slip. Splat. Slip. Splat. Slip. Slip. Yeah, I wasn't being hyperbolic or dramatic or anything. That was an actual cutscene that actual human beings made and put in their video game. Alice has been cursed by Slurp Slurp Woman, and Su Shen is here so Yuri and Margaret team up with him and fight one of Slurp Slurp Woman's demons and break the curse and free the village. We then learn that the village and the other village that we saved from the cat demons were home to 2 of 4 protectors that keep some sort of demon locked away, but this ultimately won't matter because after the Japanese army shows up pretending to be smugglers, They sail the party to Shanghai. They fight Slurp Slurp Woman on the way there, arrive in Shanghai, learn that Xu Shen knew Yuri's dad. They get over that little drama, meet up with some of Xu Shen's old friends, enter a dungeon where a tiny child that likes cat puns way too much has them do a challenge to get the last surviving guardian thing. But as they arrive at the last surviving guardian thing, Duhai's spirit invades that guardian's body or whatever. Oh yeah, Duhai, that's the guy that was a dog that blew up Margaret's plane. Anyways, his spirit invades someone who I think is the guardian and knocks the party out, and then kidnaps Alice. The party then returns to Shanghai, where the smugglers reveal themselves to be, wait for it, Japanese spies, which we've known for over 8 hours. The spies then get betrayed by the rest of the Japanese army and decide to help our party mount an assault on Duhai's tower, so that they can stop him from doing the thing he's going to do, and to rescue Alice, of course, and then they do that. At the tower, Roger Bacon shows up for a cameo and then leaves again, and then the party faces off against Duhai. I don't know how to pronounce his name. While the party successfully overpowers Duhai, he is still successful in his plan, which he reveals to be the summoning of an ancient god for some purpose. However, Yuri sacrifices himself and uses his harmonix powers to fuse with the god, which somehow makes the god not fuck over the world. Okay, so with Yuri dead and gone, we are halfway through the game, and we're also kinda through the worst part. The first 20 hours we spent in Asia was a chore to play through. So much filler, such a disorganized narrative, so boring, so infuriating, and ultimately pointless in relation to the overarching plot of the game. And the next 2 chapters in the game are not that. They are concise, straight to the point. There's no filler subplots about the Japanese government or anything like that. The first chapter, the Asia plot, has so little impact on what is gonna happen in the next 2 chapters that aside from the characters encountering each other and getting to know each other, the game could open on chapter 2 and be fine. Actually, it could be better if it opened there. But anyways, what's gonna happen next? Okay, so 6 months later, the party have traveled to Europe, and while Margaret is off somewhere looking for clues and leads to the demon god Yuri's whereabouts, Xu Shen and Alice have become exorcists and travel the countryside and rid towns of evil, much like what we did in the 2 towns in Asia. Their latest case take them to the Czech countryside, where a mysterious red fog has enveloped the town, much like the red fox they encountered in Asia did. Maybe the 2 are connected, you might think. Well, they're not. As our party investigates the mysterious castle close to the village, they come across a vampire, Keith, who joins them as a party member, and upon returning to the village, the party learns that the mayor was the one summoning the monsters for some sort of capital business venture, and then they kill him. And then Keith lets them know that he will join them permanently in their travels if they clear out the monster that he has locked away in his castle. The party agrees, but when they go face off against the monster, they find out that the monster is actually an amnesiac Yuri, because of course it is. This is an anime. So they literally beat some sense into him, and Alice goes into the monster spirit graveyard that is also somehow Yuri's subconscious, and she makes a bargain with the demon master to trade her soul for Yuri's sanity. And the masks then warn her that they will come for her soul when it's her time, and this is actually kind of a touching moment. And it's one of the few points where this game gets it right. Characters, like in the last game, have actual narrative arcs, and they develop and change organically as the plot goes on. Neither of our party members are the same people we encountered in the beginning of the game. Alice isn't a prude, Yuri isn't rapey, etc, etc. When we get emotional payoff like this, it makes the first 20 meandering hours of the game feel a little bit more enjoyable in retrospect, because it gives a tiny amount of purpose to those completely pointless 20 hours. After the touching and very much earned reunion, the party make their way to France and meet up with Margaret. See, this is the place where the game started. This is where the news article from the opening FMV is taken from. The murdered man mentioned in the article was Alice's father, and Alice's father isn't just some random dude. No! After the emigre document was stolen from the Vatican, that's the document that Patrick used to attempt to resurrect his wife in the first game, after that was stolen, 2 priests were dispatched to track it down. One was Alice's father, and the other was James O'Flaherty, one of the main characters from the first game. We, of course, having played the first game, know that James died in Nemeton Monastery, and that the emigre document is probably still in Patrick's cold dead hands. But to the Vatican's knowledge, James just disappeared, and they think that the emigre document is still out there somewhere. And so Alice's father, on the night he was killed, was going to meet up with a Cardinal Simon who allegedly had a lead on the document, which we of course know can't be true since it's probably still at Nemeton. But of course, Simon never showed up, but Roger Bacon did and killed him in an attempt to get a hold of Alice, who is somehow the key to his secret plan. Interesting. Upon questioning a local priest in France about this, the party learns that Cardinal Simon has a mansion in London, and so they go there. But before they can question anyone about Cardinal Simon in London, they stop a young boy from being kidnapped by a strange man. The boy shows his gratitude by stealing the party's money, and so they chase after him. At his hideout, they learn that many children have been forcefully taken to an orphanage, never to be heard from again, and together with the leader of the children, Hallie, they go investigate. At the orphanage, which used to be Simon's mansion, they learn that much like in Nemeton, the owner of the orphanage has gotten a hold of the document and has attempted to use it to resurrect his mother, but the ritual, like in Nemeton, failed, and so he has been kidnapping children to use in experiments to somehow restore his mother's soul to her body. Our party, horrified by this, kills both the owner of the orphanage and the soulless husk of his mother. During the fight, they learn that Hallie's mother is connected to the orphanage owner and Cardinal Simon. See, while Hallie thought that she abandoned him due to his magical powers, she was actually kidnapped by a secret organization that fights witchcraft known as the Friar Knights. They also learn of her whereabouts and that she is somehow instrumental to Roger Bacon's plan. So, in an effort to stop him, they go to rescue her. But, as the party fight their way past the last of the Friar Knights and enters the cell where Hallie's mother is being held, they are intercepted and incapacitated by Roger Bacon. However, before Roger can finish them off, Hallie's mother, revealed to be Koudelka from the first game, regains her sanity despite 3 years of torture and loneliness, and strikes a deal with Roger. She will help him with his plan if he lets the party live, to which he agrees, and then they vanish. After their encounter, Alice realizes that they didn't learn everything about Bacon or Cardinal Simon that they could in France, so she travels back to France to look for more clues as to who they are and what they're planning. She learns that Roger Bacon and Cardinal Simon are one and the same, and with this information she rejoins the party in London, and together they all go to the place that every lead so far has had in common, the Nemeton Monastery in Wales. The very same monastery from the first game. Here, we meet the real Roger Bacon, the immortal monk from the first game, and with his help, they confront Cardinal Simon in the depths of Nemeton, but just like in Asia, they are too late. Cardinal Simon reveals that he received a vision of the future, a vision in which the world goes to war with one another, not once, but twice, and that it ends with a lot of senseless suffering and a flashing light. He's talking about the World Wars. Cardinal Simon is gonna try and stop World War I and by extension World War II. And this doesn't sit well with me. It's well documented that the Japanese government suppresses the truth about World War II and have done so to such a great effect that the average Japanese person can't tell you when World War II happened, or even what it was about and what their involvement was in the war. So when a JRPG plot centers around stopping a senseless war, it just leaves a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, because I think it's scary that plots like this can emerge, because you can argue that World War I was senseless because it was, and to this day no one can really agree on who started it and who's at fault. But World War II, we know exactly who the bad guys are. The Nazis exterminated 4 million Jews, and the Japanese probably massacred just as many Chinese civilians. And suggesting that Cardinal Simon can somehow avoid this by changing one thing is really tasteless. But anyways, that's enough politics. I'll put aside my own personal thoughts for now. So how is Cardinal Simon planning on making the Nazis and Japanese Empire not make the genocide? Oh, I'm glad you asked. See, God, as in the Christian God, is actually a cosmic alien that visited Earth millennia ago, and the biblical geographical landmarks such as the Tower of Babel are actually old spaceship parts left behind by God when he left Earth. And Nemeton is one of those parts. And so Cardinal Simon uses Koudelka's powers to raise it to the sky and use it as a beacon to call back God to Earth, so he can bring about Eden. Because we all know that the planet was a peaceful and lovely place to be about 1,000 to 2,000 years ago, don't we? No senseless killings at all. Anyway, so Colonel Simon does that, and now their party is fucked, right? Nope. The real Roger Bacon actually has a teleporter, and the party use that to teleport up to the floating space alien monastery above and confront Cardinal Simon once again. But in true bland RPG fashion, we of course have to complete a boss rush before we can do that. And if the poor optimization and balancing of the combat hasn't become obvious at this point, it definitely becomes it here. Combat in this game is really shit. Elemental weaknesses were present in the last game, and using them to your advantage was a requirement to win some of the tougher fights. But in this game, using the right elemental spell does like 10% extra damage, and using an element that is the same element as the monster you're fighting usually just does the same amount of damage as any other element would have. But you don't even need to fucking worry about this, because melee attacks do more damage and are easier to pull off anyways. Yes, technically not, but in reality they are. Let me explain. Spells do more base damage than melee attacks, but unlike spells, melee attacks scale off of equipment, and since the developer didn't bother to balance this game at all or place loot drops, they just put a vendor in every dungeon, and the monsters drop enough cash that you can always have the best equipment available at all time. And with that equipped, you do more damage with melee than you do with spells. Oh, and another thing. Some bosses have moves that insta-kill the party if they don't have the right rings equipped. And you have no way of knowing what ring to use before the battle, and every boss fight in the boss rush has one of these attacks. So you're forced to fight every boss at least twice to know what ring to equip, and sometimes 3 times because some bosses don't have save points in between them. And oh, it's not like the fights are short or anything. Every second enemy in the 8 enemy boss rush gets more health. So you start off by fighting bosses that have 3000 health, which is already a lot, and end with fighting the last boss, which has 12,000 health. And the fights take even longer, because all the bosses do AoE attacks 90% of the time that take off 60% of all your party members' health. So Alice has to AoE heal every turn, and a secondary character has to constantly chuck sanity and mana potions at her so she can do that, leaving only a single character to do DPS, which makes the fights last around 20 to 40 minutes. And it's not like it's 20 to 40 minutes spent in absolute intensity trying to outsmart the enemy. No, you're just hitting X over and over and over and over and over again. So yeah. After we beat up Cardinal Simon, he's just like, oh, maybe stopping World War II by calling Space Guard wasn't such a good idea. And then he just helps us to go fight Space Guard, and then we do that. Which is another boring 40-minute fight like I just mentioned, where we just hit X over and over and over again, and then we kill God. Oh yeah, we kill the Abrahamic God, who is a cosmic space alien. And that's the end of Shadow Hearts. Margaret and Sushen go back to their respective professions. Koudelka and Hallie set off to meet Hallie's father, Edward, from the first game. Keith gets a girlfriend and has a bunch of sex, and Yuri and Alice get on a train heading for Alice's hometown, and they all live happily ever after. Except that they don't, because Alice faints a last time. This time for good, because the masked guards decide that now is a good time to reclaim her soul, and they do, leaving her to die in Yuri's arms. And this is actually a really fucking good ending that rivals that of the first game. But it would be so much fucking better if it took place in a good game and not this steaming pile of... Wait, no. Not in this mediocre PSP RPG. So yeah, that was Shadow Hearts. At the end of these things, we always ask the question, is the game worth playing? But I think you already know what the fucking answer is. And you're right, it's fucking not. Full on honesty time. I knew going into this that it was gonna be a letdown. I was aware that it had made sacrifices to meet its budget and that it was a step down in terms of quality compared to the original. But I also knew that playing this game was basically essential, as it both ties up some loose ends from Koudelka by showing us what happened to her after the game, what happened to Edward, and the aftermath of the whole thing. But not only that, it also sets forth the events of the sequel, Shadow Hearts Covenant, in motion. And the plot of that game won't have the same punch if you haven't played this game. Because Covenant deals a lot with what happened to Yuri's psyche after Alice died. And it of course takes place during World War I, which we know happens because we didn't let Space Guard create a Neo Eden, so... This was a miserable time for me, and it was 40 hours, yeah. 40. That I on one hand wish that I could have spent on a great game instead of this, but also I'm kinda glad I did it. And I'm glad I stuck through it, because Covenant is supposedly excellent and fixes all the problems that this game has, which are many problems. So many that I left out a good third of them in this review because of time constraints. Anyways, so yeah, if you're still watching, then don't go play the game I just played. Because I went ahead and did it for you, so you don't have to suffer to get the critical information contained within it to properly appreciate the sequel. A sequel that we'll take a look at next time, when we cover Shadow Hearts Covenant. I'll see you there. Bye bye!